Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the moment. Um, so we're going to talk about cash, and I think, or I'll give the reasons why I think we should all, most of the time, in when we're paying for stuff, say, "I'll pay cash." When the person reaches for the card machine, go, "I'll pay cash." Right? So it's like to get over. I think I'm going to give you a bunch of reasons why, in general, we as a society we should keep cash, and why the benefits of digital currencies. There's no benefit to totally getting rid of. Well, the benefits of totally getting rid of cash are very small compared to the harms of doing that. And so we should keep it that we have both cash and digital payments. And this might not seem important, but it's very important because I'll get to that in a bit. But basically, I'd say this is a crucial issue. Like if we lose cash, we're in big trouble. And so that's in general. But in order to, and certain governments definitely have they want to do this, and they've even admitted it, some of them. But it gives them more power, basically. And look at history, open a book. Governments like power. So, so the key thing is, rather than trying to persuade governments that, oh no, don't take away more of our power, that's not a good idea. The way to do it is just to persuade the people to keep using it, and so then we don't have this problem, So this is not to governments, this is to you, normal people. I think basically if we go around and, keep using cash and encourage people to kind of return to cash a bit, then I think that's going to be very beneficial. It'll make it harder for governments to just remove this. And I think, I'll talk about why, but first of all, I think just the practicality of saying that, like, oh, I'll pay cash. You do it with a friendly voice, tone of voice, just calm assertiveness, I'll pay cash. Not, do you mind if I pay cash? Is it okay if I pay cash? It's kind of, or you can say that if you want. Sometimes I've said that, but the phrase I've gone for is just like, look, I'm the customer. I'm allowed to do this. Customer's always right, I'm not doing anything wrong here, so just say, hey, this is what I want. And sometimes they're like, oh, we don't take cash. And then, I'll go, oh, okay. Or what I've been doing more recently is I just communicate non-verbally, I'm not really happy about that. I don't give them negative energy, but I just show them like, oh, that's not what I really want. But yeah, I think it's totally socially acceptable, totally smooth and easy. People just go, oh, okay, yeah, cool. And you see some restaurants or businesses, they'll have cash preferred, digital accepted, cash preferred, support cash freedom, or some places are only cash, and so we're going to get into the reasons behind this whole thing, like why should you pay cash? So first, a little song. I was born in a money man's world, but I didn't have that cash to spend. I just had ones and zeros and it never ended. I was in a nightmare. The government could tell me what to do, and just one time I went to a protest and then my funds were frozen and I was sent to the gulag, and it was still a money man's world. And then I went back in time and everybody started using cash, and it was a different world. The freedom remains. That's a song fresh from the subconscious. If you don't like it, or if you do like it, please send your letters to Jamie's subconscious. So, I've got a list here because there's a few details here. So, independence. The main reason, I think I can see why, people think, oh yeah, digital is more convenient. Who needs cash? And so we'll go through those reasons as well. But on that side, we'll be balanced here, of course. We just want the truth, right? But we'd only be hurting ourselves, cheating ourselves if we were lying to ourselves or trying to be unbalanced. But yeah, like I think in a nutshell, people who think, oh, that'd be great if we didn't have cash, I believe those people are not aware of just how untrustworthy, powerful, how many untrustworthy, powerful institutions are in existence right now. So basically, if we really were in a democracy and there really was proper, like, it's like a full-on democracy, in the West, and it's not controlled by huge corporations in bed with the state, manipulating things and causing crises and doing all kinds of shenanigans to make profit and get more power and profit. If you think that's not happening, I would invite you to consider that it might be and see if you can find any patterns. Because, again, I try to keep a very balanced perspective, and honestly, it just seems like that is happening. And I think most people can either know that, or else they can feel like, yeah, there's something to that. Like, so maybe you could look into it, but I think a lot of people don't want to look into it because they're like, head in the sand kind of thing. Like, I don't really want to have to deal with that. What if that's real? But the crazy thing is, like, having your head in the sand doesn't protect you from predators. Actually having your head out of the sand is much safer. And so people think, but it's subconscious. There's a subconscious belief that it's safer to not pay attention and not to not go about risking the discovery of big problems. But actually, if those big problems exist, it's independent of your discovery, right? The world doesn't revolve around you. They're already there, even if you haven't noticed them yet. Or they're not there. So what's the harm of going and finding out? Nothing. What's the harm of not looking? There's a great harm. Maybe you're going to get eaten while you've got your head in the sand, So the lion will just eat that ostrich or whatever with its head in the sand. Oh, cool, quick dinner. So yeah, so I think a lot of people, but then that thing of like, oh, I don't want to do it. I don't think that's conscious. I think it's an unconscious thought process that's going on. And so the first thing I think is we need to try to help each other, help our brothers and sisters who are in that position to become aware. How to do that? Good question. Probably a topic for another episode. But to help them become aware that there is an unconscious thing going on that they're not aware of in their mind, which is basically that, like feeling like, oh, ignorance is bliss. If I can't see you, you can't see me. Let's just not think about these things, and that way everything will be okay. It's like, actually, it's the opposite. If enough people pay attention and realize what I believe, that there's a lot of there's people basically who have been subverting democracy in the West for decades, at least, and they're very organized. Actually, I admire their organizational skills. They're very, very good at what they do. I don't know exactly who they are. I think it's a minority of basically our most powerful institutions. Essentially, all of them, a minority within them, seem to be working hand in hand in some sort of oligarchic conspiracy. Don't believe me? That's fine. You can still take the rest of this episode and for what it's worth. But I would say there is very good evidence that there's a big problem. There's, our institutions have been captured by most people in them are very good people doing their job, but then there's a minority in there who are in positions of power, and basically money. We think, money, the power of money is awful, isn't it? What's the power of money doing? Is it just trying to trick you into buying stuff? It's just paying for the election of politicians and not asking them to do anything. It's just, we know they're paying them, but they don't want anything back. The truth, the cold hard truth is money. The power of money has been ballooning for a long time, and it has been using that power. It hasn't been wasting it. The people who are so efficient that they can monopolize and get huge sums of money under their control, they have not been sitting idle. For the same reason that they got that money, they have been using it to get political control. And so anyway, I won't go more into that. But, look at the episode, is it safest to assume a global coup is underway? And you'll get the drift of my opinions there. So independence, basically cash. In a nutshell, if it is the case, if I'm right, and there are people who are trying to basically take away individual liberties in order to give themselves more power, status, opportunities, just like you want more opportunities, you want more money so you can go on holiday more, you can have more interesting experiences, better quality services and products, take care of your family. These people want the same thing, but on a bigger scale. And, I only have 1 billion. All my friends have 10 billion. How am I going to get up to their level? Well, maybe I'll do what needs to be done. So if we are in a situation where the institutions are, and there's just enough, big companies, big central banks, all kinds like militaries, intelligence agencies, etc., in an attempt to basically water down democracy and eventually, remove democracy, it seems. And then, is it safe to be going to a digital currency? No cash. No, it's not, because say a digital, you could basically, like in Canada, a bunch of people, the basic thing is, if there is no cash, the government can just turn off your bank account anytime they want. They threaten the bank, hey, we're going to close you, or we're going to whatever, bring you in for questioning, or we're not going to give you we're going to make it difficult for you, whatever. And anyway, the government's kind of owned largely by big corporations who also own the bank, so it's all in bed anyway. But you have to shut down this person's bank account, and if you don't let us have that power, then we have a problem with you now. Maybe we'll shut you down, or maybe we'll replace you with someone else who will play ball, or we'll shut down your bank account, Mr. CEO. And if you don't believe that this is possible, this happened during the pandemic in Canada. There's a bunch of illegal, unconstitutional rules brought in. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Brian Peckford, I think is his name. He was a former premier of Newfoundland, and he was the premier. Newfoundland, Labrador, is it? He was the premier at the time when Bill of Rights was brought in, and they modified the Canadian Constitution to bring in these protected liberties. And all the premiers of the provinces were there. He's the last surviving one. So we have his word. He knows not just the letter of the law, but the spirit, because he was in the room. And he's a very honest-looking person. You get that feeling from him, right? Hearing him speak. I'd recommend Jordan Peterson podcast. He had an episode with him. They talked about it. Pretty intense, but very, very good conversation. And basically, he was saying, "Hey, the government's broken. It's violating the Constitution." So that's Exhibit A. Okay. Then Exhibit B. There's these trucker protests where all these truckers across Canada, they were going into Ottawa, the capital, to protest because they're saying, "Hey, you're saying we can't work if we're not vaccinated, but a bunch of us, we don't believe the virus is very deadly. We don't believe the vaccine is particularly safe or effective. It's only been studied very briefly. We're not telling other people they can't do it, but we don't want to do that ourselves. We just want to, and we are the backbone of the economy. The people who were being celebrated as heroes were in the front line when we were bringing the services around at the beginning of the pandemic." And basically they, gathered. It was a big thing. Canadians rallied around this, and it was a very big thing. And they went into Ottawa and they camped out there and just kind of shut down the city, just being in the streets, to get awareness, saying, "Hey, this is our democracy is being violated, and the judiciary, the judges, aren't intervening. So, as has been put in the constitutions of like America, and the classic fundamental thing we learn about in school or you should learn about in school of this is how democracy works, is the last line of defense is not the judges. That's the second last line of defense. If the government is breaking the law, the judges get them in trouble. They put them in prison, and the police have to do what they say. If they're still not obeying it, like say the police or the military are captive, or the judiciary is captured by by the government or the same people who have captured the government, then we the people need to go on the streets and reassert our sovereignty. and the same sovereignty which created these democracies. It didn't come from some elite. It came from the people. As part of the elite, usually were involved, the more educated people, working with the people, but it was always a mass movement, grassroots. And so it says, like, this is what needs to happen. And that's what happened in Canada. They were saying, hey, the government's going too far. We need to push them back, They're not, it was very peaceful, it wasn't like violent revolution or anything. And the government refused to talk to them, and then eventually sent in the police, and brought in some law and just violated, not just, they were already violating the law with the pandemic powers they'd passed, but they just violently uprooted this protest, and they froze their bank accounts, and they froze their GoFundMe thing. And even the people who'd send the money to the GoFundMe, I think they were harassed also. So not just people in the protest, but the people supporting it. And so, and you heard like almost nothing about this in the mainstream media. And there's like a blackout. And mainstream media, who is also largely owned and gets very large amounts of its advertising revenue from these big corporations who were benefiting from these tyrannical laws which were being brought in. So even if it's not some cabal of small group of people trying to pull strings and just bad people taking power, like that has happened throughout history, I'd say that is part of it, I feel. But even if you don't believe in that, surely you believe in the snowball effect, whereby corporations pollute rivers, have countries invaded, Halliburton, Dick Cheney was the former CEO of Halliburton, goes in, blows up Iraq for no reason, no evidence of weapons of mass destruction, but then awards a no-bid billion-dollar contract to Halliburton, which he was just working for. And so this is a well-known thing, the revolving door of big of government and corporations, the corporate world. Anyway, so even if it's not a cabal of people, doing this kind of intentionally, just this movement of it's beneficial to be exploiting the situation, and so it's in your fiduciary duty as in the corporation to do what you can, and so it's within the law to kind of we won't belabor the point any further, but basically in Canada this happened and it shut down the protests, and now that could happen anywhere. If like say in China right now, like if you don't go along with the government, that they I believe they can already shut down your banking, but of course they can just do whatever they want actually there, but so imagine like that's a dangerous thing, right? And even if you think the governments now are trustworthy, what about 10, 20, 30 years down the line? So why would we provide this incentive for bad people to get control of the governments? If there's no cash, it's going to be, they can just say, we can just freeze your bank account and you have no cash. You can't even survive. And now, alarmingly, they're even talking about they're bringing it in and they're talking openly. Bank of England is talking about this. The Federal Reserve in America is talking about this. Although the Fed is being more sneaky and pretending that it's just for businesses for now. But basically talking about central banking digital currencies, CBDCs. And this is basically a kind of Bitcoin thing, except it's not decentralized and anonymous. It's centralized and completely, there's no privacy. The government knows exactly what's in your bank account. They know exactly what you're doing with your money every minute of every day. It'd be you have a bank account with the government at the central bank, sort of the government. Technically, they're private banks, as far as I can tell. It's very hard to find that information, but it seems to be so. Like the Federal Reserve, for example, has shareholders in the USA. We don't know who they are, but they print the money and make a profit off it somehow. Anyway, and part of it is that they will be programmable, so that you say, okay, for climate change, you're eating too much meat, for example. They could be like, oh no, you've already bought meat, 3 times this week. You can't buy it another time. So your money works for everything. It works for vegetables, works for dairy, not meat. You try as you might, you will not be able to buy that. It doesn't work for it. It's programmable. Or if they say, there's a lockdown, everyone has to stay within 2 kilometers of their house, your money will, digital money will work within 2 kilometers, but mysteriously, any further than that, it doesn't work. And so how are you going to organize a protest in those circumstances? How are you going to share information? And so it makes totalitarianism very, much easier, right? So I won't go into any more detail on that point, but so basically independence, freedom, liberty, political independence and sovereignty of individuals is much easier with cash remaining, because we can just live off of that even amid attempts by tyrants to try to control people. And I think people who think that this is not, I mentioned this first, this is the most important reason to keep cash. People who think that this isn't relevant or it's not important, I believe they haven't done their homework about exactly how fragile and unhealthy our democracies are at this point in history. That's just the waves of history. It happens. Ultimately, it's not a problem. It's a problem, but ultimately it's not a problem. Because it's just the flow of history. This is how things work. We need to wake up more, basically we get comfortable, and then things kind of start to degenerate, and then we have to wake up and start paying attention and fix the problems. Then everything's great and we get comfortable and chill, and then things start to fall apart again, or people try to exploit stuff. So we're in that phase of history where we have to kind of, in the West especially, where we have to wake up and go, oh, okay, are we in a democracy? And I would say basically, look, let's just keep cash while we're sorting some stuff out, while we're checking that our democracies are strong and that we're not at risk of totalitarianism and Nazi level government control. Let's just wait on that. We don't need to do it right now, do we? We're okay. Moving on. Let's talk about, before I go through all these other benefits of cash, we'll just talk about the negatives of cash, or the positives of, say, digital currency. So security. So stores don't need to have cash on hand. They can just, so someone comes in asking for the money, hey, we don't have any cash here. So obviously that's a benefit. However, that can be managed with just have better policing and have less income inequality and just have a healthier society where there's less poverty and mental illness, which largely comes from a lack of opportunities in life and a lack of narrative and a lack of community. So if we can pull together and have a more beautiful narrative of we're taking care of each other and we have a direction. This is what we're about. This is where we're going. Then I think crime will be much less. And anyway, we could just have better quality crime prevention. And but still, that's a fair point. But I think again, businesses who really maybe they're in bad neighborhoods or something, cool. They can be digital if they want. Just no cash. But I would say in general, we can't have that becoming the rule. That has to be the exception. But again, I believe in freedom. So I think business owners should be allowed to make that choice themselves. But I would just try to persuade them that, hey, cash is a good idea. Not just for yourself, but for mostly as a societal thing, because there's a lot of evidence that we're at one of those points in history where, people are being selfish and trying to take away the rights of others. And if you think that's a conspiracy theory, then how do you explain all of human history where that happened time and time again? Was it a conspiracy theory in Rome, in Greece, in Egypt, in with Genghis Khan, in the Aztec Empire? All these societies where bad people took over. All around the world, every society seems to have happened. So, and even our own societies in the West, say I'm speaking for, throughout time this has happened. But anyway, okay, so security. And individually, I guess you could say, not having cash on you, people can't mug you, you just got a card, they take your card, you freeze the card. Fair enough. Tax evasion. So people can't avoid tax, if you're paying by a card, there's a paper trail, so you can't skip out on paying your tax. I think two things. One, we pay too much tax, way too much tax. So actually it's a good thing, that cash allows people to pay less tax, in my opinion. I think we shouldn't have tax on anyone who's earning a working wage. It should be much lower taxes, and basically the government takes with one hand and then gives back with the other, and in the process it burns up a lot of the money. So it takes X from the left hand and from the people in terms of their productivity, and then gives back, 0.7x with the right hand, redistributing here, there, and everywhere, but often to politically connected people. There's a lot of problems with that. Often, investing in things that don't really make sense, or doing inefficiently because people can't lose their jobs. And so that human instinct of, ass to the fire kind of thing that's always been there, you remove that, and, it's an opponent process that keeps us in balance. And when you remove that, we kind of get slovenly. We lose our path, It's very hard to resist. So I would say we should be paying less tax, and so cash is a good way of helping the people out in that. But then also the real people who are, the big case of tax evasion are the elites, Panama Papers, Pandora Papers, all these, big, corporate CEOs and government, officials and stuff. So many of them have been caught red-handed with their money off in like the British Virgin Islands, just not paying any tax, or using, if you're big enough, you can pay an army of accountants and lawyers to find loopholes, or even lobby the government to create loopholes. And basically, okay, we spend 10 million a year on this, but we would be paying 100 million in tax. So yeah, we're saving 90 million by doing this. And so they can just spend, okay, so all these, accountants and lawyers, they're doing fine, you might have noticed, but the businesses on the main street, or normal mom and pop businesses, are in big, big trouble. So many businesses have closed down all around where I am anyway. And it seems to be that case in many parts of the West and the world, I would think, but I'm not sure. But yeah, so basically, I don't think, and then will they be able to avoid it with, if it's digital? I don't think so. I think they're going to have those accountants and lawyers. They're going to find a way around it. They're the people kind of writing the rules anyway. So I think it would help with tax evasion by, it would be good. Oh, there's big companies who aren't paying their fair share of tax. They should pay that, But the biggest companies of them aren't going to pay it anyway, because they're too politically connected and they're too financially powerful that they can, whatever system's created, they can weasel out of it. And then it just imprisons all the people who it's meant to be protecting. So I think a better thing would just be, we should massively reduce taxes. And then with all that extra money that we're not sending in as tax, we can use that to take care of ourselves rather than the government taking care of us. And then also we're more independent, which goes back to the previous point I was talking about. So organized crime, cash does allow organized crime, or terrorism, or kind of violent groups or whatever can use cash. But I'm sure the CIA is doing the same thing. So yeah, that's a fair point. It can be used, whereas maybe a digital currency wouldn't be able to do that so easily. But I think that's one where I go, yeah, that's one thing. Digital removing cash, because I don't have a problem with digital currency, like using digital transactions, but it's just having it as the only thing seems very dangerous. So yeah, I'd say that's worth it. Like, they can use cash, yeah, but we can use cash as well. And don't punish the many for the sins of the few. So yeah, these people will be using it, but it causes more harm than good by removing cash. Basically, yeah, that's a little harm we have to deal with, but the benefit we get from keeping cash is much, much, much greater than that. All right. Corruption, and money laundering. Again, it's like they'll find ways around it, even with digital currencies, and just control of influence, peddling, and just contracts and who gets this deal, and commodities, and all kinds of just things like this. There's many ways around it, and besides just having loopholes where you can have your digital currency. Oh, it's legal, it's fine. I'm not paying tax because of this. I ticked that box over there that no one else knows about, but except politically connected lawyers or whatever it is. Germs, cash, spreading germs. I think not a big deal. It's more dangerous, really, to be using soap, hand sanitizer every day, apart from for your mind, because you're just falling into lockstep with what you've been trained to do by your government. But no offense intended. But also, yeah, it's not good for your skin flora, the microbiome of your skin. There's all this good bacteria and stuff there. And if you're just killing it off with these hand sanitizers, then actually you're more at risk for bad bacteria, like, ringworm and eczema and stuff. I don't know about eczema, but yeah. So actually, better to just wash your hands with water. You're fine. Maybe don't put your hand in your mouth directly after touching cash. But even if you do and you get sick, that really just means you should be eating more fresh food, probably, because I think someone who eats a lot of fresh food and is active, they can be putting their hands in their mouth. They could be licking coins, and I don't think they're going to get sick. This is not medical advice. Cost of printing, I think it's very small, the cost of printing these things, and money gets damaged. But yeah, it's a cost. But yeah, I'd just say, so fair enough. That's a downside. We're mentioning it, but it's nowhere near as significant as all these positives. So let's get back to the positives here. Positive. Think on the bright side of life. Look on the bright side. So tipping, you can tip with digital stuff, but it's much more common for people to tip when they've got cash. I got a little bit of cash in my pocket. I don't really want that here. Yeah, I'll put it in your jar. There you go. Good vibes, and it's good for me. But then in many cases, people don't have those machines. They don't have it set up. So tipping someone, cash is very helpful for that. And especially waiters and stuff like that. You can just give it to them. They don't need to give it to their boss. I remember one place I worked at where there was all the tips collected, and we never saw any of it. It just went to the business, and we all wanted our jobs, and so we were like, fine, turn a blind eye, just deal with it. But someone gave me, occasionally would give me cash directly, and then I wouldn't put it in that jar. I was like, no, that's mine, because I knew I wasn't getting any of the cash which they were putting at the counter was being put there. So that's something where people, and a lot of people in service industries, they're not getting much money. And so that's actually a very, a vital lifeline for a lot of people. They don't pay tax in it. So it's a way where they can get, in these times of high cost of living, that's a lifeline. And so removing cash is going to take that away. There'll be some tipping with cards, but nowhere near as much. And it's in many fewer situations. So again, makes sense to keep cash. Similar is busking. People like performers, musicians, busking, throw some coins in there. How many buskers are going to have a thing where you can tap with your card and you just line up and you tap it? It's not as beautiful as just casting a few jangly coins in there and they go, oh, thanks, and just, again, fewer people are going to do it. So, and then there's less art in the street. Is that a good thing? No, you want people to be performing and sharing beautiful music and stuff. And so that's a good thing there. Let's see. So, pocket money. So kids, giving them a little bit of pocket money. And I remember getting, here's a $1 coin and just staring at it and passing it through my fingers. And for kids, that's really cool. So being like, here, I just sent $1 to your bank account. I have a bank account? Yeah. Can I access it? Well, mummy's busy, but you can look at my phone later. I'll show it to you. There's a 1 on the screen. Not the same thing. The $2 coin. This old Aboriginal elder dude on it. Whoa, that's so cool. And then, $5. I keep almost saying euros. And just helping kids, learn about money, so giving them the pocket money, that's a nice little thing you can do. It's a physical embodied experience. And also, learning about financial management, and self-discipline, saving up money, save up your pocket money. That's a thing you can do with a piggy bank and rattling. We've removed cash. There's no piggy banks. They're gone. Giving kids pocket money, that's gone. It's not in your pocket. It's in your bank now. And we have to get kids bank accounts early and get them into the grid more. And in general, I think there's a lot of, to be said for embodied experiences. A lot of people are returning to cooking their own food, growing their own food, having a business meeting in person rather than on the internet, just because it's embodied. You're in the same room, you're sharing space. And I think there's something really beautiful and healthy about being an animal and being in 3D space. And that's something which is we want to encourage. And so cash is another kind of way of having your money in the physical world. Some people want to use digital, cool. And I'll still use digital sometimes. But one example would be if businesses are really busy, I just use my card because I want to make it easier for them. But in general, I'll pay cash, and they're like, sorry, we don't have change. You're giving me a 50. We don't have that. It's in some big souvenir shop with all these, green Irish hats and stuff. I was trying to buy some random thing. And they were like, we don't have change for a 50. It was like the middle of the day or the end of the day. And I was like, what? And so I had to give them just a 10. So I think, yeah, that's fine. It's like, okay, you're not in a rush. I'm just going to give you this. And even if they're like, we don't have change for that. And if it takes a bit of my time, I feel like it's worth it. I'm making them go, hey, this has happened a few times this week where someone tried to give us cash and we weren't able to do it. This is kind of annoying. I don't want to be annoying people, and it makes us look a bit bad. It kind of incentivizes them to be, all right, how about we just keep 100 euros of cash here constantly in fives. We just keep it here. And anyone comes in, we just refill it. We're still making however much money we make each day, but we've got a baseline of cash we keep. That's what they should be doing, in order to run a business, I think, and not to be discriminating against, say, elderly or seniors or, whatever, who maybe aren't using digital stuff as much. And so, which is another thing, so I think it's much harder on those people if there's no cash. So that's a good reason to keep cash. And another thing is disabled people, say, especially that mentally disabled people, then, it's much simpler to just use cash. So rather than you could say just the card, maybe that's simpler in a way, but then managing it and knowing how much money you're spending, I'd say, or perhaps, maybe there would be an argument that for mentally disabled people, cash would be harder, but I don't think so. I think it's more embodied and simpler, but I don't know. But yeah, okay. So immigrants, the people who don't speak the language in a place, it's much easier to just deal with cash rather than to be looking at all the numbers on the screen and what do I do? I press this or setting up bank accounts and stuff, or managing. I would say it's a bit easier, not too much easier really, but and then what else? So yeah, people, the unbanked, like poor people who don't have access to bank accounts, then obviously if this comes in no cash, then everyone will be given a bank account. But there's people who, as is, they'll be put under a lot of stress, and they are being put under more stress by this situation where more people are just not accepting cash. And let's see, and so people, not just digital literacy, but digital kind of facilities or tools. There's people who are don't have smartphones or etc. who they need cash right now, and so why don't we just keep it? Budgeting. So if you go, I'm going to go to the casino, or I'm going to go drinking, or whatever it is, I'll just bring this much money in my pocket. So then it's an easier way to have self-control. Than a card. And apparently they've done studies where people with cards, predictably, you spend more money because you can't keep track of how much you're spending. And so what I recommend people do, I should have mentioned this earlier, probably practical stuff. Housekeeping is I take out a certain amount of money where it's plenty, it'll last me a week maybe or a bit less, usually a week if I'm not going too crazy. And then if I'm going a bit crazy, spending more money, then I run out of cash. I'm like, oh, okay, go get more. Go to the bank, go to the ATM, just get more out. But it's like a sign of okay, you spent, and then if I do that a few times, I've done this twice this week. Oh, I think I'm spending too much. Careful, tone it down, or just be aware that that's happened. Why is that? Oh, I spent on this. Okay, yeah, it's all good. I'm not overspending. It's just there's been some things I needed to spend it on. So it's a way of being more financially aware. And it's easy, just get cash out and then, homeless people, on the street, you can give them money. That's one thing. If we remove cash, that's going to make it much harder for people who are down on their luck or down on their discipline, and for whatever reason, they're, addicted to things or they're in a bad place, mental illness, people who are on the street because of mental illness, cash is a lifeline for them too. Privacy. So, banks and corporations and governments not knowing what you're doing with your money, that's a beautiful thing. And even in terms of freedom and independence, the surveillance state where they know exactly, with metadata, they can put everything together and they know exactly what you're doing. They've got a profile of what you do and your habits, and then they sell that to someone and they whoever they are, but they're people here. This is how it actually happens already. There's an avatar of me or you and they're aware of our habits to some extent, and they sell that information to others to target us with advertising, etc. And so, that's just going to be, that's already quite invasive, and we're not getting anything from that, and we're not getting any cut of that pie. But also, for totalitarianism, it's very dangerous if the citizens don't have privacy. Ideally, the government should kind of have almost no idea what the private citizens are doing and thinking, but the government is run by the citizens, and so there's no problem. It should be the opposite. The government should be all transparent, and the citizenry should be opaque. But it's the opposite now. The government's opaque. We don't know what they're doing, and the citizens are completely transparent. Everyone knows they know what we're doing. So it's all topsy-turvy, not very good. Kids selling stuff. So kids being able to, just the other day, there's some little girls in the corner selling these little bows. And I was like, oh yeah, oh good job, how you doing? Interact with them, pleasant little interaction. But they're also kind of building, skills and entrepreneurialism. The kind of outside their comfort zone, talking to strangers and learning how things work. And I give them a bit of money. I give them a bit extra. Here you go, 50 cents. No, here's £2. Thanks for that. And I get the bow, whatever. And so that kind of thing, or selling lemonade or whatever. What, they're going to have a card machine, are they? I don't think so. Small businesses, the costs of having cards, digital payments. Again, if this is brought in like cashless society, they'll probably try to smooth the edges of this and in some way. But, although these big institutions have shown, like during the pandemic, a tendency to help big businesses and drive the middle class into the ground, like Target's open, but all these small businesses are closed and not allowed to open. But small businesses often prefer cash because, again, they can avoid being overtaxed, which is what, it's not avoiding tax, it's avoiding overtaxation. But also just the costs of 2 or 3% you have to pay to the bank or the credit card, the person who runs the machine. So that raises your cost. Either you raise your prices and passing it on to the customers, but then you're going to be selling less because people are going to be, it's a bit out of my range. Just lower prices, you sell more stuff. So, or you take the hit and then you're making less money. So what, less customers or less money? Either way, cash is for people with very narrow profit margins. It's a lifeline to them. When technology fails, how many times, the card machine doesn't work. Okay, good thing we have cash, the card machine's not working. All right, well, I want breakfast. I want one of those sandwiches. We can't give it to you because then we need money. Well, your card machine's not working. Yeah, well, we're going to have to close. There's all these people, all these sandwiches that are going to go into the bin, all these people who don't get food, they're less productive, they're annoyed, that energy spills out into the society. Do we want that? No. So keeping cash as a backup is a great idea. Let's see. Emergency, so again, if you're traveling, having a bit, 50 quid in the bottom of your bag is very useful just in case you lose things or you get robbed. So having a spare card doesn't really make sense, or it could get broken. Cash is easier to just kind of roll up and hide somewhere. In terms of just if there's some sort of crazy situation or there's some problem like, my card doesn't work for some reason. My bank just collapsed. Thank God I have cash. There's all kinds of situations we could think of where basically cash will be useful in an emergency. It's just a basic thing that everyone will accept because, I want your cash, sure. A few more things here. Energy use. So, like having these digital systems that uses a lot of electricity. And so, I guess that would be kind of balanced with the costs of making the plastic or paper or metal money. That's a cost, but there's also the cost of having everyone using these digital systems, and everyone needs to have a card machine, which you tap and then your money goes into it. And there's all these systems monitoring it and the traffic and, people repairing the system. There's going to be a massive investment in hardware and software and just like production of electricity. And that's probably going to involve, a bunch of somewhere in the chain around the world, like, pollutants in the production of more energy, and that energy could be used elsewhere. So, that's at least as big a problem, I think, as the costs of making physical money. Victims of abuse. So kids or teenagers or victims of domestic violence, or so these people, there are people out there in the world who are in terrible situations, and their victimizers have control of the money, the bank accounts. And so if they're planning an escape to get out of there, cash is very, very useful for that. And without cash, they're going to be pushed into dangerous things like prostitution or, God knows what, just to try to survive. So, yeah, like someone who's like, someone who's going to be like a manipulative person, they're very likely to be in control of the bank accounts and have it all under their thumb. And so, yeah, we can conceive of people who, or maybe they don't want to be able to, even if they have access to the digital money, using it, and then say the husband, wife beater husband knows where they are now. That's maybe not a good thing. So if we remove cash, that does make it difficult for those for victims to kind of get out of Dodge. So that's just another of one of these many things we're mentioning, where cash is actually very useful. So, it's funding terrorists. Yeah, but it's also helping, people get out of difficult situations. Let's see. Yeah, and I think basically I'll just close by saying, like, why do we need to do this? There's no need to do it. The only real need is like, oh, isn't it amazing, the future? Like, well, the future's great, but the present's more important. And it's always the now. But anyway, the benefits of removing cash are almost non-existent, and there's a few of them, but the harms from it are overwhelming. And so I think even if you don't agree with me that we're at danger of totalitarianism in the advanced democracies of the world, or advanced economies which tend to be democracies, that's fine. Even if you don't agree with that, I think you should still be persuaded that you should be going around saying, "Oh, I'll pay cash, please," and kind of encouraging the use of cash, and just for stability and unity, keep things simple. Like a bunch of people are like me, and they really are very concerned about the moves, the declarations of these powerful governments and institutions, kind of shepherding society towards this two-factor authentication or anti-money laundering, tightly regulated kind of Orwellian Big Brother system, where the Big Brother knows everything you're doing at every hour of the day. And so, wouldn't it be nice if the government didn't have total control over our money? And cash gives us a bit more power there. But again, even apart from that, I think it's the most important reason here. There's all these other things. Even if the governments were totally trustworthy, I would be saying, actually, no, we shouldn't get rid of cash. We can do both, have digital payments and cash. And I think for a long time coming, that should be what we're doing, unless there's some big changes in the way society works and where the arithmetic changes. But right now, that makes sense, even without the whole thing of like, totalitarianism kind of sneaking in through the back door with the WEF or, whatever. Or the Great Reset and all that. So I think just to keep everyone together, even if you don't think there's a problem, be aware that a lot of your neighbors think there's a problem. So wouldn't it be better if we can just all stay united and not get divided by this, and not have one more issue that divides us? And just to keep things simple, we've got a lot of problems we're dealing with in the world. We're at a bit of a bottleneck in history. There's a lot of things we have to deal with, all kinds of problems: environmental, cultural, financial, military, ideological, technological, ultimately spiritual. And so that we've got a lot of serious challenges. We don't need any more challenges. And so, these moves to get rid of cash I think just very unwise. And I think we should all not wait for the people behind these initiatives to come around and agree with us. No, we should just start using cash more and enjoy it. And I enjoy using cash. It's like, yeah, cool. Not just because it's like you're more embodied. I'm like, yeah, using money and here's cash. Da, 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 da. It's kind of more fun than just tapping, and it's easier to budget and maintain awareness of how much money I'm spending. Um, but also, I get the the feeling of participating in the health of society by knowing like I'm part of a movement to keep balance here, where we are keeping the people in power. And so please support cash freedom, and go around, get out cash once a week or twice a week or whatever, and yeah, go say, oh, I'll pay cash. So, all right, see you next week.